No.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm Eric.
Lovely to meet you, Eric. How are you doing?
Very, very well. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so well lit.
Yeah, really, really. I'm jealous.
You look gorgeous.
Before we start, do you have a preference in words, whether it's queer or gay, for talking about Tim or yourself?
I don't have any preference.
Fabulous.
Either or. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. Uh, Congratulations on your Emmy nomination. My
Thank
gosh.
you. Thank you.
Uh, what were you most excited about, though? The news of the Emmy nomination or carrying Kylie Minogue to the stage at Hyde Park with Andrew Scott?
I think both were just as surprising as each other. And will go down in history in equal measure. For me. But I know I thought you were gonna say the Emmy nomination or the fact that you now get to talk about fellow travelers again. No, I feel like the real trophy for any gay man is to carry Kylie. So yeah, I think me and Andrew, we were like, because I was on my way into, I had a very short amount of time back at home, and I was seeing my friends. We were all going to go see Kylie, and a group chat was formed, and it just said, I think it said dancing, and I was like, who? And he was like, Kylie Minogue started a group chat, and I was like, who else is in it? Andrew Scott and me. So yeah, she said, would you care to carry me stage? And so I found two um medical versions of being carried, both of whom like the person had either sort of passed out or obviously it's a joke. And I was like, what's the least glamorous way? Well, there's no way that you could not. It was always going to be a stunning thing. And but yeah, no, we obviously said yes because we represent a whole community.
Exactly. You were doing it for us.
Of course, for everyone.
I love that. Um, with how huge Bridgerton was immediately and how much it gave you visibility as an actor, did you actively seek out something like Fellow Travelers, or did that come to you?
I it was sought out, I think. But also, and it's also not just by me, but there's like a whole brilliant group of people who are, who represent you, and Duncan Miniship and Tony Lip are two managers that I sort of met after Bridgerton came out, and they were so instrumental, and have been so instrumental in finding brilliant sort of things to dive into. But Fellow Travelers was something that had been talked about really early on, and I was so aware of it. It just felt like it was in the ether. And I think after doing, obviously a love story with in Bridgerton, I really did feel after the pandemic, and everyone was sort of questioning, our identity within the world and the relationship with it, and then suddenly everything sort of changed. There was loads of opportunities coming, and I have always wanted to tell a gay love story in that way. And but bizarrely, when you think about, I don't know, being an actor and what will be available to you, the idea of playing those roles actually weirdly felt less likely than playing a straight lead, which also felt like it might not be possible at times. So yeah, I found doing Fellow Travelers incredibly like leveling and grounding in such a huge way, in terms of the invitation to be able to study and research and live that sort of queer experience over 40 years, but also, um, you know, yeah, being able to come back now because the Emmy noms talking about it again. It's just like, it's endless energy it gives to talk about something that feels important. And also I just would have loved, I always say this, but I would have loved watching it had I not been in it. So it's just one of those things that,
Yeah.
I can't even remember the question.
No, that was wonderful. What was your understanding and knowledge of the Lavender Scare in the '80s era of the AIDS epidemic when you were growing up?
Well, I knew more about the AIDS epidemic for so many reasons. The inherited shame of it, all the things that we have to unpick as gay men, and also confused sort of misunderstandings about gay experience from everyone as when I was growing up in a small village in England. But and then also there's brilliant reactive art, sort of plays and films about the AIDS epidemic, and we know that the story of AIDS has been a very cinematic, and it's taken up a lot of space in the representation that we've had growing up. But in terms of the Lavender Scare, it felt like it was going to within our sort of capacity, like going to the grassroots of, it's just a genius thing that Ron Nicewain has done to join the dots of all these, and there's an absolute through line with oppression and power, and managing people and using scare tactics, which and effectively what the Eisenhower EO and the way that McCarthy dealt with it is, also the founding sort of start of something that ends with, a whole government that refuses to acknowledge a huge endemic sort of disease that is affecting gay men. And, it just, the sort of vocabulary that's used in the 50s, it echoes all the way through. So yeah, anyway, I knew more. I knew a lot about in the 50s in England. I think I knew more about that. And did you know much about the Lavender Scare?
So let's see, I was a teenager in the 80s. So I was definitely aware and very conscious of the AIDS epidemic in the US here. And so this is pre-internet. So if I was trying to find something, and I also grew up in a very small town, I had to hope that my county library would have some information, but it was always really difficult. And what ended up happening is I'd have older friends, and they would introduce me to generations of gay men older than me. Mm-hmm. And that's where I got all of my history, because there was nobody teaching us that history.
It did, and it wasn't present in any books, and it was completely sort of erased, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a
deeply isolating time, I imagine.
Very, very much so. But I was very lucky. I had really good people that did that. So I felt at a younger age that I knew more things than I guess I was supposed to.
Yeah, but I think that's also of gay culture, the sort of angels of having older friendships is so important. And I know it's something that Ron Nicewain has talked about. I think when he won a GLAAD award, and he said something so moving that was just said, to people out there who, feel exactly as isolated as you did then, even in a world of internet, and due to the, the control that's, exerted onto them, that reach out to the older members of your community, because they will take you under their wing. And it's so true. So yeah, just think, if you'd have seen fellow travelers at that age, do you think that would have been?
I think about stuff like that all the time, and I always want to ask, people like yourselves that as well, because you're making something now that somebody can see, mm-hmm. and learn from. I would have loved it, obviously, but you never know what you can really do with information, I think, sometimes as a young person.
Yeah.
Because it takes a while for it to really settle in and to help map out the rest of your life. So sometimes it's you have to look back rather than feel like you are missing out on something. I'm not sure. It's no,
I know what you mean. I wonder if it's more about what your experience would have been like had the people around you seen it. It's almost like, if they understood, because I think that's what I hope it's set out to achieve, is to show that the misunderstandings and the horrible sort of
I think one of the realities, though, too, is that I probably could not have, asked my grandparents, what did you guys know about the Lavender Scare? They probably had
no idea. Of course. And I've talked about this before, but my 92-year-old Nana who watched Fellow Travelers, I realized was born the same year as Tim. And, it was so interesting, amazing. It was so bonding for her to watch it anyway. And then to go back and chart her life of what she knew. And she told me the story of, she was like, I didn't know that people were gay because, it's such a common thing for parents or that generation to go, well, just no one was gay until like, I don't know, Liberace or, when Queen played Wembley, and it's like, but Nana did say, she said, no, I did know someone who was gay, and we didn't really talk about it, but I do remember because he killed himself. And you're like, and she watched Fellow Travelers, and she just the sort of grief that she felt about working alongside someone, and that story I think is unbearably common, and yeah. Anyway, says all it needs to say, but it's been amazing for that reason. And I do, if everyone could watch something like Fellow Travelers, it'd be interesting to see how that affects, because it's all about the shame and how it permeates through. And I think Alison Williams' performance is stunning in it. And I just think that shows that everyone has, mums and sisters. It's not just fathers and uncles and cousins and sons that were affected. It's everyone around it. And actually sometimes it's the people around who are affected more, especially in the way that Hawke leaves his loved ones.
Absolutely. And women of a certain generation were sometimes knowledgeable or unknowledgeable of that and lived their entire lives as a different person as well.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm curious about Matt Bomer. Said, we talked to him recently, that he's a big homework nerd when it came to research and working with Ron. What was your process to uncover Tim, like from accent work and finding his voice? Where did you find Tim?
Yeah, I felt like dialect wise, I worked with Carter Bellamy in London, he was amazing, and then with Michael Armstrong, who was on set. And I think the finding of Tim for me, if I'm honest, is something that he was just sort of there. I can't really describe it. I sort of knew. I mean, the thing is, I sort of knew. Obviously, I auditioned with Matt, and I just thought if I did get the job, you have to be invited to do it after auditioning, and I felt like I knew what There's so much to say, isn't there, in Tim? Whether it's in like it's drawn from my experiences or not, he just sort of seemed to exist anyway. But the thing that I felt was technically fascinating is the working alongside Michael Armstrong in dialect, but also Ori, who was my makeup and hair, and Michelle, and also Brighton, who was my assistant. It was like there was such a love for all the characters that we had like a little team, like Tim's little special team on set. And that's something that I wonder if it's the same with other people, but I was just so aware of the people around me on set who helped, you talk about it. But then also with something like Fellow Travelers, and because of the nature of so many, Robbie Rogers is an amazing producer that's changing the world project by project. And he was an ex-footballer, he's gay himself, and Ron, and it's such a brilliant queer sort of spirit around it that you don't need to talk. There's a shorthand. And so the discovery, I think I just sort of understood bits of Tim, and then I just researched around what he would have understood, he would have known, listened to lots of music.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And it was really weird. I got sent I was doing a play at the time, and this sort of magical thing happened where someone somewhere sent me an EP, a record, and it was a record of one of the songs that was featured in the first episode, and it just appeared at stage door, and it was before anyway. So there was sort of elements of magic around it, which was kind of kooky, but it's all listening to the music throughout the decades was just so so helpful. And then just really celebrating the blossoming moments of liberal queer sort of hedonism and joy, and the joy between Tim and Hawke when they really were together. And it was sort of emotion, and it was led by emotion, and then sort of discovered it with Matt, and obviously Ron was just like a shepherdess sort of guiding us along our way.
Yeah. As you beautifully said in your Critics' Choice Award speech, you and Matt come together, and Fellow Travelers is definitely a seminal work in that regard. Um, I'm sorry, that's your fault. That's not my.
No.
No.
I love it.
But that does bring the conversation of intimacy coordination as such a important factor. Can you talk about the trust in working with Matt in those scenes? Because they're also really vulnerable just as an actor.
Yeah, I think what's amazing about the intimacy is that it's all about listening, and the two characters, because you establish the world, or Ron establishes the world so cleverly, where it's a place where people their queer identity is like immediately something that it's it's almost a death sentence in a way in the world that they live in, and so the moment when they come together, it's so like heightened, and they're really listening to each other. I think me and Matt had enough experience outside of Fellow Travelers of intimacy scenes, so actually we saw the opportunity of how important that, telling the story of them coming together. But it's amazing to do it with someone like Matt as well, who has more sort of sensitivity and creativity in one of his delicious toes than anyone I've ever come across. And
yes.
Which is true. It was just, I was just thinking about endless puns now, but he's a top man.
I had so many, and I'm just like, be thoughtful, Eric. Come on, relax, just a little bit. Tim's relationship with God and with faith is something that we don't see that often in gay stories, and certainly not like how it's treated here. What about that element of Tim appealed to you?
Well, I just thought it was, again, I hadn't really seen it. There was okay, I'm not going to actually remember the incredible film. Am I going to remember it? No, anyway. Yeah, and the intersection between religion and queerness is like fascinating, because it's such a cause of such pain and strife and confusion, even now. And if you're born into a world that says, being gay isn't quite right, that, and that almost is attributed to, many religions. So I thought it was a really brilliant push and pull in a character that is life, is it's the hardware which Tim is equipped with, which is two things. Religion gives him a knowledge about himself that he is wrong, and he's something about him that is innately unlovable. But it also gives him the capacity to love, unquestionably and without visual evidence of something. And also, he comes from a big American Irish family, and he clearly has, you see a glimpse of him going home, and you see he's got a lot of love at home, and there's he has a grounding sort of sense of, I think, self-worth as well. So it's a very confusing thing that religion can teach you, depending on obviously what you believe in. But I just thought, I've as a man growing up in this world, the one thing you do have to deal with at some point is the shame, and like what that is, and how that manifests itself, and how it affects you, how it limits you, and how it drives you forward. And to have something so clear for Tim, a character, I thought it was great, and it never leaves him. And actually, it's his faith that he comes back down to, because I think his final love declaration is exactly that, isn't it? It's about saying, I've spent my life loving, and that's more powerful than anything.
Exactly. That's such a perfect segue, because I think every gay person has a superpower, whether it's persistence or perseverance or just existing.
Yeah.
Tim's power is definitely that his love for Hawk and his love for God are complementary and not clashing.
Yeah.
What's your power?
Resilience.
You'll love that.
Yeah, I think resilience. Probably.
It's
and actually my superpower is friendship as well. Like, as in having, you need good people around you. But I do think I am resilient. And I think at times I felt like I'm not. And you look at someone like Tim, and you think he seems incredibly frayed and vulnerable and porous at the beginning of his life story. But you look at him at the end, and you go, what I wanted to achieve is to see he's got the same spirit all the way through, despite all of the relentless sort of different iterations of his life that he's experienced, and he's resilient. So yeah, I think we're all resilient, aren't we? Because it's not always been easy, even for us. And my God, and generations before had to experience a whole different thing. So
when I was thinking about asking that question, I kept coming back to something, and that's that you are going to be an inspiration to some kid somewhere who feels very out of place, but then sees himself in you or in Tim or anybody that you play. Because I think you're changing the construct of what an out gay actor in Hollywood is, or you're a part of that right now.
Which is amazing. Amazing. Thank you. But, there's a whole team of people as well that are making that happen. And it's not just, I've got amazing agents who don't question a thing. And I've got an agent called Nikki Van Gelder who I literally, her assistant Joe Edwards looked after me from the age of 15. And Nikki always said, well, why not? Well, why not? And it was absolutely ridiculous. Why not? And actually the power of why not is so important. And even when I never believed it, and I always thought, oh, it's brilliant. And I just think, God, aren't agents so brilliant that they say the right thing? But actually, she's a once in a lifetime person to me. And because of her, I've then also managed to meet two managers, Duncan and Tony, and, and Laurie Bartlett, who's an agent, and Dar Rollins and Kevin Evane and Andrew Curland. And also, PR wise, the thing that there's something that I haven't ever said, which I thought was so interesting. Not to me, it was really interesting, is that doing something like Fellow Travelers is you really get a sense firsthand of PR and about like Alex Khan, who looks after me, and also Cassidy, who works for Showtime, it's the allyship of getting people excited. And also for me to sit in front, like this interview is knockout, one of my, and it's so special. But I remember, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but it's worth saying, me and Matt, before the strike, we managed to do one interview and it was with a journalist whose sexuality wasn't mentioned, but I sort of assume he wasn't part of the community. And he had an hour interview, and we gave some of the most intimate, honest answers about this. And it was the beginning of our press tour, and we saw there was no acknowledgement of any of the nuance. And so it's been amazing and really exciting to be able to have these conversations with journalists in a way that so anyway, in answer to your question, there's loads of people in and around the entertainment industry and obviously globally who are looking for new stories and new opportunities for everyone. So it's been obviously amazing to meet those people and be able to talk about things, and then to find out stuff about other people's lives, because the conversation opens when opportunities arise, and you can tell that something's new and something's fresh, and something is changing and paving a new path when there is endless energy around conversation. And I think that's what I've experienced. So, thank you. Anyway, long answer.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you. This has been such a wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Especially, yeah. I hope we'll meet someday.
We met very briefly, 2 seconds twice earlier this year. One at the BAFTA lunch. I just came up and told you how much I love fellow travelers.
Yeah.
And then Big's Choice just a little bit.
You know what? It's so I'm sorry. It's so overwhelming, and obviously,
I love it.
Yeah, I can't wait to
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.